Are you in your early 40s and 50s and wondering if you're going through perimenopause? If so, check out this episode with Dr. Amanda Tracy as she shares what you need to know during perimenopause and some practical strategies for managing this rite of passage. Welcome back to This is Getting Old, Moving Towards an Age-Friendly World. I'm Dr. Melissa Batchelor, and I am a nurse practitioner, and I wear a lot of different hats in my work, including hosting this weekly podcast to bring you news and information on aging, caring for someone living with Alzheimer's disease, and a wide range of topics that I hope will help move us towards becoming an age-friendly world. Because when things are age-friendly, they're friendly for everyone. So if you like the podcast, the best way to help me grow and support the podcast is to like it, share it, and leave a review in whatever platform you've tuned in on today. Because no matter how old you are today, we are all aging, and these issues are going to become increasingly important. If you're a millennial, there are things that need to be in place when you reach the age of 65. So we have about 20 to 25 years to get these things in place to help you age with the support and choices that will help you, just like the people that are 65 today. Your likes, shares, and reviews help get the information out to help more people dealing with these issues. But right now, let's get going on this week's episode. Now let's dive into this week's episode where we're talking about what to know about perimenopause. And I'm joined by Dr. Amanda Tracy, who's a neuropathic physician, who has an online practice specializing in perimenopause, plant-based nutrition, balancing hormones, and educating women to have a healthier perimenopause, which means greater aging. So welcome, Dr. Tracy.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So before we get started, maybe just introduce yourself a little bit and tell us how you kind of got interested in women's health and then kind of niche down to perimenopause.
Sure. As you said, I'm a licensed naturopathic doctor, and I provide integrative and holistic medicine for women over 40. And I really got interested in nutrition and science and medicine as a teen. And personally, I never had regular periods. I would have periods for a few months, and then they would disappear for months and then come back and go away. And I had every test done under the sun, ultrasounds, blood tests, everything. And my doctors couldn't find anything wrong. They said everything was normal except my period pattern. So at the time I was vegetarian. So that was always what they pointed to. Like, well, maybe if you ate meat, you would get your periods again. But I wasn't about to do that. So I went on my own path of investigation of trying to have more plant-based diet, increasing my protein. And then when I went to naturopathic school, I started to add herbs and other supplements to my regimen. And I will admit, immediately it didn't provide much success. My periods were still mysterious. They would come and go for 6 or 12 months at a time. But as you might imagine, medical school and undergrad is a time of high stress. So I think that was the major player at that point. And then when I was starting my practice, I was still fine-tuning my herbs and supplements to try to have better cycles. And I should also say, when I had my period, it was a breeze. I didn't have PMS. I didn't have a bad period. There was nothing wrong with it. It just would disappear for a while. So it was concerning, but also not too troubling because it wasn't, disruptive to my life. But I really found that making the full switch to a vegan diet really helped to get my cycles regular, along with stress management and using the right herbs and supplements. And I was able to get my period so regular that it would come every full moon at 3 a.m, which is kind of a little annoying, but especially when I was used to going through a year without having it at a time. But I really felt like really healthy. And I found like I really was able to enjoy having a regular cycle and feeling normal and healthy. And I really, through that journey, really got interested in working with women and helping them with hormone balance outside of fertility. Because even when I was going through medical school 25 years ago, if you wanted to focus on women's health, it was about fertility and midwifery and not much outside of that. So I really wanted to focus on the rest of our lives. And as I was growing my practice, I really started to see a lot of women in their early to mid 40s with symptoms of hormone imbalance. And I found that natural and integrative medicine was a really good way to address that because it more is the outcome of our daily lives, our nutritional choices, the stress, having children later in life, taking care of older parents, and everything that happens in our 40s and 50s compounds the symptoms of our natural hormone changes. So I find it a really interesting area to work in.
Yeah, I'm actually investigating integrative medicine a little bit more myself. So let's talk about what women need to know about perimenopause.
Great. This is my mission. A lot of women are thinking that hot flashes or missing their first period is a sign of the change beginning and their hormones changing. But really, I want women to know it starts years before that, maybe 5, maybe 7 years before you start to have those symptoms of menopause. So it can start at 40, it can start at 45. It's different for every woman. And it does start slowly over the course of 6 months, which is a little tricky to identify. What I'm finding in my practice is it's happening a little earlier for women and the millennial age women, closer to age 40. And I think that may have to do more with stress and other factors, that they're starting to have symptoms of perimenopause. So in our 40s, we start to produce less of the hormone called progesterone, and that starts to change our cycles a little bit. So our cycles start to get a little shorter. So instead of having maybe 30 days between periods, women will start to have 26 or 27 or maybe 24 or 25 days between their periods, but they're still regular. So it's somewhat unnoticeable for a lot of women. Right. Also, the length of time we have our periods can get a little longer. So instead of having a 5-day flow, it might be 6 or 7 days. Also very subtle, and women might not catch that the first few months it's happening. And also having that lower progesterone can change our PMS symptoms, make them a little bit more severe or start bringing on some new symptoms.
Yeah, I was just going to say that kind of brings the point of like being sure that you're tracking your period. Like I have the P Tracker Lite app, and sometimes that will let you know, or at least you can objectively see like when was your last period, first day of your last period, how long did it last, so definitely tracking so that you can pick up on those earlier, that this particular symptom a little bit sooner. Other signs and symptoms of perimenopause?
The other ones are the trickier ones to put your finger on. So I'm always recommending tracking because yes, life is busy. We may not realize those subtle changes, especially if we're not trying to become pregnant and focusing on our cycles as much. The other symptoms are happening because estrogen levels are going up and down a little bit more erratically. So a little bit like puberty, although not quite exactly. So that changes our sleep quality. So we tend to get to be a little bit lighter sleepers, even though we maybe still be sleeping 7 hours, we're not being quite as rested. We can be a little bit more tired, a little bit more irritable or easily on edge, or feeling stressed for no reason outside of PMS symptoms. So at any time of the cycle, again, which is good to track it. We can also start to feel a little bit more bloating because our digestion starts to slow down. So not so much to cause heartburn or anything severe, but just feeling a little bit fuller after meals, a little bit more bloated, and also have a little bit more water retention. And this can also lead to headaches as well. So there's subtle things that start to happen, like the fatigue and the headaches. They're not every day. It's more general. But often when women look back over a year or two and notice those changes in their cycle, they have some of these other symptoms going on too.
Okay. And so is there a negative, like, it's not like I picked up on any of those things, at 6 months prior to anything happening. So is there any detriment to like not being aware of that and just kind of?
Nope. If you're not having a lot of those symptoms, and as far as the cycles, if they're at least 24 days apart, you're having enough of a window after ovulation and your period starting to have enough hormones for them to be in balance. They'll be at lower levels than in your 20s and 30s. But if the periods are at least 24 days apart and you're not having any changes in fatigue or sleep or headaches, then you don't have to do anything. It's let time go on. And you may not notice those things if you're managing stress well, and if your diet is really balanced and other things in your life are more balanced and more healthful, that's helping to minimize the inflammation from the changes in hormones and and lack of sleep. So if you're otherwise managing those subtle changes, you don't necessarily have to treat it like medically.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about the impact of chronic stress on these hormonal shifts.
Yeah. So as I said, I'm starting to see women in their earlier 40s with looking like it's perimenopause, especially with the cycle changes and all of those other symptoms. But when we're doing some hormone testing, we're finding that it's actually stress hormones have shifted, and that has changed their hormones to make their perimenopause symptoms start appearing. So when we're under stress, we produce the hormone cortisol, which causes our fight or flight response. But if we're under chronic stress, which most of us are in our daily lives, having kids and jobs and family members to take care of and social media and traffic, all those wonderful things, we're always producing a little too much cortisol. And the body can do that for a little while. And then it starts to draw from other hormones to make cortisol, because all of our hormones are made from cholesterol and they're pretty similar to each other. So our body can interchange one for another pretty easily. So for chronic stress, and we're trying to make cortisol to get through it, we change progesterone into cortisol. If you remember, in our 40s, progesterone's already getting lower and we're not making as much of it. So if we're under chronic stress, we have almost a drop off in progesterone that's more like a more cliff instead of a gradual drop off in our 40s. And that causes a lot of symptoms of perimenopause to abruptly appear. So it seems almost like menopause for women in their 40s when it's actually not, because their ovaries are healthy and they could produce enough hormones if we weren't using them to make cortisol.
Okay. So we have stress management, making sure that we're sleeping, our diet, exercise, those things. So let's talk about like some unique and practical tips for managing perimenopause and kind of why those things are important. I think we've kind of touched on it, but we'll just kind of go through each of the tips. Yeah,
I like to work with women in my practice and go through their day and start in the morning. And hopefully they've woken up after a little bit of sleep, because that's usually something we're working on. And to start the day with a glass of warm lemon water. So using about a quarter of a lemon in some warm water. And that helps to stimulate digestion, because digestion gets slower in our 40s. So it helps us get ready to digest food more efficiently. And it also helps the liver to detoxify. And the liver is the main organ that's responsible for tempering those estrogen levels that are going really high and really low. So if your liver is healthy, you won't have as many swings of estrogen high and low. So that can help make your mood a little bit better and help to control some cravings and inflammation. So starting the day with lemon water.
Yeah. And thanks for clarifying. It's a quarter of a lemon, because I tried this the other day and I did like half a lemon. I was like, ooh.
Yes. Then you'll run into problems with maybe heartburn from too much acid and losing your stomach, your enamel on your teeth. Yes.
One cup of water, quarter of a lemon.
Quarter of a lemon. Sometimes I have women start with a sixth if they like really don't like lemon at all, and this is like a really new thing for them. But a quarter of a lemon is good. And then after that, you can have coffee. So if you're normally a coffee drinker, 1 cup in the morning, that's the amount that isn't too stimulating to the adrenals, so it doesn't cause too much cortisol. But the key is for it to be in the morning and not in the afternoon.
Yeah, I do think this is one thing a lot of people don't know, is the impact of caffeine on our adrenal glands actually causes us to not be able to lose weight either. So trying to maintain a healthy weight, you're having trouble losing weight, to really look at the amount of caffeine that you're drinking in addition to everything else.
Yes, that's a really good point, especially because a lot of people will use coffee as more of an appetite suppressant to try to eat less later in the day.
Or a stimulant because you didn't sleep well the night before.
Yes.
Yeah. And I've actually talked to like traditional medical providers in the past and said, I'm drinking like 6 Nespressos in the morning, mostly probably to help with my ADD. And they're like, oh, that's okay. And I was like, I really don't think I should be drinking that much coffee. But if you say it's okay, and now I'm happy to report I'm down to like 1 8-ounce cup of coffee in the morning and then no other caffeine the rest of the day.
That's wonderful. Yes, it does take some time to work to that place, but having that 1 cup in the morning and actually enjoying it versus having 6 and maybe not enjoying them all.
Yeah. And to me, it was like the light bulb went. I was like, oh, so maybe that's why I'm retaining weight. I never really thought about that. So So what are some other tips for managing perimenopause?
Yep. So as you go through the day, green tea is fine. It has less caffeine and it does have the compound theanine in it, which is more calming. And green tea has extracts that do help the liver process estrogen. And so it is balancing for your hormones. So that would be the backup to like not having more coffee. For food, I recommend that women in perimenopause especially have at least one, sometimes two orange foods per day. So like orange foods like carrots and sweet potatoes, yams, butternut squash, even mangoes and papaya. They're really high in beta carotene. So that's the form of vitamin A that actually helps us make more progesterone. It helps the liver to not get rid of the progesterone we already made, and it concentrates in the ovaries and actually helps us have better ovulation, which helps with perimenopause symptoms.
Yeah, it's funny because I actually recorded a podcast yesterday, and I was like, someone was telling me about eating orange foods because they were, talking about eating oranges and sweet potatoes at night to calm brain inflammation. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like if you're paying attention to, all these tips kind of feed into each other, but so you're improving your perimenopausal symptoms, but you're also, protecting your brain as well.
Yes. So. And we do make estrogen and progesterone in our brain, and it stays within our brain. So they do have unique aspects to our brain health, and often it mirrors what's going on systemically. So usually the same tips are there for the brain and the body, which is good. It gives us less to do, less separate things to do.
Right. It's kind of dovetailing. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about kind of stress management. Like what tips do you have for stress management?
And that kind of comes up as we're going through the day, thinking about the afternoon. Usually that's where people are feeling maybe they either hit a wall energy-wise, or they start to get tired, especially if sleep's a struggle, or that's for a lot of busy moms. That's where they have a lot of activity that they need to do all of a sudden in the day. So, and that's also a time that can bring on sugar and salt cravings, especially if you're under stress. So it's important to think about a way that we could practice stress management. Sometimes in the afternoon works for people. So I help women with trying to figure out what that is. And lots of times it's a simple breathing exercise. So anytime that you can exhale longer than you inhale, that tricks the brain into moving out of the fight or flight mode and into the rest and digest mode, which is the parasympathetic mode, which is relaxing. So even if you're sitting in the car pickup line or at a soccer game and you're feeling a little stressed or overwhelmed, that's a good time to just take an inhale for 4 seconds and then exhale for a count of 6, and then repeat that a few times. And even if you can't necessarily do a full meditation for stress management at that time, that at least helps your brain get into that mode. So finding a time for that breathing exercise is a good way to fit the stress management in a busy lifestyle.
Right. And I think a lot of times, people, when you feel stressed, you might reach for other things to try to manage that stress. Heard a lot recently about kind of women and alcohol. So maybe talk a little bit about the impact of wine on perimenopause, and not that you have to be a teetotaler, but what are your recommendations for that? So if you're doing stress management, you'll probably drink less wine.
Yes, because that afternoon time or evening can be a time where people do reach out for wine or sugar. And wine, as we talked about the liver already being really important for helping estrogen levels be stable, alcohol does affect the liver. So the liver sees alcohol as a toxin and kind of like drops all of its other responsibilities and focuses on the alcohol. So if it does that, then if you're drinking wine, then your liver doesn't do all of its work to manage your hormones or decrease inflammation. It's just focusing on the alcohol. So it takes it away at that point. And then also, even though it is relaxing initially, alcohol can be a depressant in that way. So it's initially relaxing, but it also then causes a rebound spike in cortisol, which can keep us up at night. So I definitely recommend to my patients, if they're going to have a glass of wine, to have it before 7 p.m. or even earlier before dinner, and then not after that, so that they can process the alcohol before they're going to sleep at night, because sleep is usually a struggle for these women.
Right. And, a glass of red wine is supposed to have, cardiovascular benefits to it as well. But, that's a 5-ounce glass of the red wine, either with a meal, because it's actually part of the blue zones as well. And then, I've also found that, eliminating alcohol and then increasing water, but even stopping that at like 8 o'clock, stop drinking water at 8, because otherwise you end up waking up to go to the bathroom.
Yes. And I usually have women to, after dinner, if they're taking some supplements or calcium, just have that as close to dinner as possible. And then maybe not have any more water and have a cup of herbal tea, but still try to have that, an hour and a half before they're planning on going to bed. Because so your work's so hard to fall asleep, and then waking up 2 hours later to go to the bathroom and then not being able to fall asleep is such a struggle and so disappointing.
Yeah. But our brains are 80% water, 20% fat. So being sure that one of the first things you do in the morning, is either just drinking a full glass of water or doing the warm water with lemon is really good as well. And for sleep, trying to get the 6 to 8 hours in the evening. Now, what do you recommend for people that are kind of waking up with hot flashes, which is probably like you're definitely in perimenopause by that time?
Yeah. So the hot flashes start to come when estrogen levels aren't doing that dance up and down anymore. They're starting to go down, and it does affect our perception of temperature regulation. It doesn't actually affect our body temperature. It's more about how our brain and nervous system react to changes in temperature. But if you're waking up with hot flashes, there are lifestyle tips as far as wearing cool like bamboo pajamas and wearing layers and things like that. But nutritionally, you'd want to avoid coffee after the morning, especially because that can trigger a hot flash. The alcohol we've already talked about. Some things that can increase sweating are like spicy foods. So sometimes avoiding spicy foods for dinner helps, and doing more cooling foods like cucumber and watermelon, especially in the summer. Sage tea is really helpful because that reduces sweating. You can also get sage capsules to reduce sweating, which I use with a lot of my patients that are on medications for ADD and ADHD that might cause some stimulation and sweating with that. So sage tea or sage capsules can just reduce the sweating. And I should also say not affect your hormones. So if you're looking to do something that's not going to, affect estrogen, or you just don't want to mess around with your hormones on your own, sage is a good option. Another option is maca root, MACA. That is a root from Peru that's eaten a little bit more like a carb or sweet potato for them. But for us, using it as a supplement has been shown to help women in perimenopause and menopause with hot flashes and night sweats. It also can prevent vaginal dryness and does have a little bit of an energizing effect if you're under stress. So if you're under stress, maca would be something to look into.
Okay. Now, this is October is breast cancer awareness, and been part of the FAB over 40 contest raising money for the National Breast Cancer Foundation. But one of the things that they say in their documents is that hormone replacement therapy is a risk factor. So at what point might women consider hormone replacement therapy, and kind of what are some alternatives that you might recommend for that?
Yes, and estrogen replacement therapy does increase your risk for breast cancer. So it's something to you're always weighing the pros and the cons in your risks. Any exposure to estrogen is increased risk. So that's one thing to look at. The other thing to look at if you're considering estrogen replacement therapy is the severity of the symptoms you're having. So if you're having extreme night sweats and hot flashes, like 20 or 30 a night, and not getting any sleep, that's one reason to consider it. You'd also want to look at your family history and your own health history. So there are studies showing that using estrogen replacement in the first 3 years after menopause can greatly reduce the risk of Alzheimer's and reduce the risk of heart disease. So if you have a strong family history of Alzheimer's, it would be maybe a consideration. And also heart disease, especially for women that don't have other risk factors for heart disease, like they don't have high cholesterol or high blood pressure, and they're not overweight. And it's more of a genetic familial reason that they would have heart disease, that estrogen might be more beneficial for them. And also looking at bone density. So taking estrogen replacement therapy the first 3 years after menopause can halt the loss of bone, the dramatic loss of bone that women have those first 3 years. So if a woman is already going into menopause knowing she has maybe osteopenia or low bone density or a family history of osteoporosis, it might be more of a consideration for her. Mm-hmm. And all of those are in consideration, especially if you have a lower risk for breast cancer, family history and personal risk. So that would help to make the decision. But there are other options besides estrogen to help with symptoms. Maca root, as I already mentioned, phytoestrogens, which are plant compounds that are structurally similar enough to estrogen to make your cells feel like you have some estrogen there. So that kind of tempers the symptoms of menopause, like hot flashes, but also could have some positive impacts for your heart and your bones. And it doesn't have to be soy. I do recommend, if my patients are tolerant to soy, to have organic tofu, organic tempeh, or soy milk that's just organic soybeans and water, so a very clean soy milk. But if they don't want to do that, there are phytoestrogens in many other foods, like onions, apples, chickpeas, hummus. So there's other ways to get phytoestrogens, and you don't have to have soy.
Okay, that's good to know. So if someone was interested in kind of working with you, being part of your practice, let's talk a little bit about kind of the structure and the format of how you're doing your online practice and helping women nationally.
Yes. So I started my online practice after having a brick and mortar for many years in Massachusetts. My online practice I started 2.5 years ago, and I can see women all across the country. I work with women one-on-one or in small groups. So one-on-one, I recommend that we do usually start with a 6-month program, because that helps to give us enough time to move through a few rounds of hormone changes, especially if women are in perimenopause or even just after menopause. Things are changing pretty quickly. And I like to do a full investigation of hormone testing, neurotransmitter or brain chemical testing, stress hormone testing, and gut testing to get a full picture of everything that's going on. So we can fully create a plan that would include specific nutritional changes, herbs, nutritional supplements, and hormone therapy if needed. A lot of women don't realize that there's other hormones we can use for hormone therapy besides estrogen. So there are other hormones that are further up the chain that have less risks that your body can still change into other hormones. So the hormone therapy is a wide range of therapies. So, and then we meet monthly and tweak the plan as we go on. And they always have access to me directly through a chat function. And in the group program, I run that seasonally 2 or 3 times a year. And that runs for about 6 weeks in a group of 8 to 10 women. And we go through the 5 main topics to work through in perimenopause and menopause, as far as good hormone balance, detoxification. We focus on sleep for a whole week and nutrition. And then we do have mini sessions one-on-one. So women do get personal guidance through the 6 weeks as well.
Okay. So what's the name of your practice or your website so that people can find you?
Everyone can find me at dramandatracy.com. And there's also a free grocery guide and recipe guide there for hormone balancing foods. So if you're looking to incorporate some of the foods we talked about today, I have some ideas in the recipe guide that's on my website.
Okay. And that's Amanda. But Tracy is Tracy.
Yes.
I told you my best friend, Tracy, also, but she's an EY. So
yes.
It'll also be in the description for this episode and my blog. So any final parting words or advice, recommendations?
I would say, if I would challenge your listeners to tomorrow try one of the strategies we talked about today, either starting the day with the lemon water or trying that breathing exercise or having 2 orange foods. Okay.
Well, that's easy enough, or might be easier said than done for some. So
yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with me today and talking about what we need to know about perimenopause.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. You can check out other episodes on this platform or visit my website at MelissaBPhD.com. Thanks to listeners like you, in the first 18 months of This Is Getting Old, we have reached a ranking of top 10% globally, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your support in making that happen. I'm also really excited to let you know that you can now work with me directly, either one-on-one or you can join one of the groups that I coach. Particularly if you're an adult child dealing with an aging parent or a caregiver trying to manage the complexities of someone living with Alzheimer's disease. In the show notes, you can also find information about how to reach out and contact me directly, and I hope to work with each of you very soon as we discover and share more ways to make the world more age-friendly for everyone. My website also has information about how to contact me for speaking engagements, or if you have someone you'd like to recommend as a show guest for This Is Getting Old. If you have a product or service in the aging space that you would like to advertise and or sponsor an episode, there's more information about that on my website. And you can also find books and courses that I developed and learn more about the products and services that I recommend. So don't forget, if you like the podcast, the best way to help me grow and support it is to like it, share it, and leave a review in whatever platform that you've tuned in on today. Your likes, shares, and reviews help increase my rating and my rankings, and also help other people find the podcast. I look forward to reading your reviews and hearing from you.